on a river. We go with the flow of the river, and sometimes that's fast and sometimes that's slow, but we're not trying to either outpace the river or hold back against the river. We realize that the universe is this vast, wondrous river of consciousness and evolutionary impulse. When we do that, we can relax into our role, what is ours to serve, because then we can become servant leaders, and we're all leaders in this journey. And we can become, instead of a role model, we can become soul models.
Hello, dear ones. It's good to be back on air with you for Series 8 of All That We Are. We are here in our 8th year, and we are joined by our amazing team, Annegret and Mary, who make this podcast possible. When we went on our break at the start of the year, I had hoped that violence in Gaza, Sudan, and around the world would have stopped, and we'd be having a fresh conversation about how we repair after ceasefire. This has brought so much up to the surface about the way our global culture of power operates. From here, through this series, we will explore the grief and heartbreak that I know I am feeling, and many of you are too, as more and more horrors unfold. And we will be exploring how we create a more beautiful future in the conditions of our world today. I do feel that it's vital that we gather in person so we can attune together and explore ways of collective action, so we can inspire each other and keep each other's spirits up. We are hosting a retreat this June, the weekend of the 14th to 16th, which will include a temple night of grief and prayer, as well as space to explore collective action. The theme of this retreat is to remember. At a time of rapid change and peak duality, it feels deeply important to gather together in community where we can transform. The theme of remembering is to remember who we are, our soul's essence, to remember how much is possible, both within our own lives and the collective, to remember the power of our prayer, our grief, and our joy. We will be hosted in a beautiful retreat centre in the Forest of Dean, the lands which inspired the writing of Lord of the Rings. The Asher Centre is a special place founded on values of inspiration, connection, and purpose. And this is where we'll be. It was founded by Zabanu Gifford, who you will know from podcast episodes 6 and 100. We will be next to an ancient spring and forest and held by the rose gardens in bloom. This is an invitation for you to come and weave with other listeners of All That We Are podcast and their friends and spend an unforgettable weekend with like-hearted souls. Over our time together, we will experience daily attunements with meditation, breathwork, embodiment, and mantra, an opening and closing circle, a collective prayer and grief temple, a community celebration of gift sharing with music, poetry, and other expressions of the heart, a space for personal contemplation, including the labyrinth, meditation hut, and ponds, time in nature with the rose gardens and the ancient forest, a rebirth ritual with a sacred spring, a space to explore collective action for a more beautiful future, healthy, nourishing meals with many ingredients from the land. This is the kind of retreat where you can come on your own and you will leave with new friends and collaborators, or come with your partner and friends. Community and inclusivity is at the heart of All That We Are. I do hope that you can join us. You can find the link to reserve your place in the show notes, as well as to the experiential course that I've been creating online, which is Reclaim Your Intuition. My guest today is Dr. Jude Currivan, a cosmologist, planetary healer, futurist, author, Evolutionary Leaders Circle member, and previously a senior UK-based international businesswoman. She has a master's degree in physics from Oxford University, specialising in cosmology and quantum physics, and a PhD from the University of Reading in the UK in archaeology, researching ancient cosmologies. Having traveled to over 80 countries and worked with traditional wisdom keepers, she is a lifelong researcher into the nature of reality and author of 7 nonfiction books, latterly award-winning and best-selling The Cosmic Hologram, Information at the Center of Creation, which came out in 2017, and The Story of Gaia, The Big Breath, and the Evolutionary Journey of Our Conscious Planet, which came out in 2022. Since 1998, she has been in service to our collective and planetary healing from a perspective that we are traumatized by a dis-ease of separation, and that a unitive perception and narrative is vital for our conscious evolution and future potential. In 2017, she co-founded WholeWorld-View to serve unitive awareness, conscious evolution, and transformational change. In this episode entitled The Essence of Grace, we explore the themes of intuition, unity, and metamorphosis as we speak to the question, how do we become soul models that can lead our evolution from a place of love and authenticity? We hope that this conversation transforms your relationship with your life, this world, and what is possible. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration, the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams. And we begin to embody all that we are, all that we are becoming, and all that is possible. Jude, it is an absolute delight to welcome you to All That We Are. Thank you for being here.
Amisha, it's my delight.
I just really feel this radiating presence from you. And it feels like a really beautiful embodiment of the work that you're doing in the world to meet you and to be with you here.
Thank you, my dear. And as my American friends say, back at you, because I think you're doing wonderful work with All That We Are. And this is the time, isn't it? This is such the time for us to link up and lift up together. You were mentioning in service, and it's in service for the good of the whole, and not just the whole of humanity, but our beloved planetary mother, Gaia, and literally the whole world, which I hope we're going to explore today.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's begin by you sharing with us the futures of your wildest dreams. What is your big vision for us?
Well, it's my dream for myself as well, because I think we're all on this journey together. So I hope it's a dream for us all to wake up, to remember we're inseparable. You know, we've had what I call a dis-ease of separation, and that's the lens through which collectively we see the world. And when we see the world through a lens of separation, we behave in that way. So my dream, and it is a dream, because that separation of itself is an illusion. It is a dream. The deeper reality is indeed that we are inseparable from each other and the whole world. So that is my dream, that we wake to that, not just understanding it, because a lot of my work is the science of unity, but that we experience it in our lives and we embody it in our lives. And then we can truly not just see the world through the lens of wholeness, but become wholeness in action, become love in action. That's my dream.
Beautiful. Can you share with us more about the science of union and wholeness?
It's wonderful. And it's also quite, I know you're of Indian heritage. When I was a little girl, I was having experiences and literally walking between worlds. And so the world that I was experiencing was not what I was being taught at school, was not what, my society around me told me was the case, but something much more profound, much more expansive. And I looked for answers. I wanted to see where in the world were these experiences for others. And it was ancient India. And so I started reading the great writings, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and especially the Ishnavaya Upanishad, when I was a little girl. And what they told the rishis, the great seers, the great sages of ancient India told us that mind and consciousness aren't something we have. They are literally what we and the whole world are. And that, after nearly 70 years of my own journey of experiencing the world in this way, this is now what leading edge science is also saying. After a long time of maintaining that our universe is essentially meaningless and purposeless, and that, mind and consciousness arise somehow out of our brains, evidence at all scales of experience and existence across many, many different fields of research are turning that view on its head. And they're coming to this, what I call beyond knowledge, the wisdom, the remembered wisdom, which is now a science of unity, but it's converging with ancient wisdom teachings, universal, spiritually based traditions, indigenous traditions. And for me, one of the most powerful of those is that Vedic tradition of ancient India. And even the languaging, the visioning, the perception that leading edge science has come to is so resonant with that depth of wisdom.
Absolutely. That's so beautiful. I've just been spending a little bit of time in India, and it was my first time back for a while. What I experience when I'm on Indian land is that there's just so much space for my soul. And so it's so easy actually to drop out of like mind space and to communicate and converse with others like in this other way. And one of the things that I find challenging, and it has been changing about like British life or Western life per se, is that you're constantly having to either hold back because things are seen as, we have all this horrible language of strange and woo-woo and funny, like to talk about what's just so natural of the human existence, which is that it is multidimensional and it is beyond control and power over and this kind of like the material day-to-day reality. And that actually we're always operating on so many different levels at the same time, and that we are energetic beings and we are guided so much by our intuition, whether we acknowledge it or not, that it's playing such a huge part in our reality. And when I go to cultures like India or many places around the world, and you just can kind of just like, it's like just relax into that truth of being, that in the West there's like a constant sort of like pulling it back in and then having to over explain it, and that's quite exhausting.
It is. I mean, it is if you feel that you need to behave like that and act like that. I mean, I gave that up a long time ago. I basically said, sod this for a game of soldiers, as my mum used to say. I'm not trying to impose or persuade anyone, but what I do in my own life is to live my life as authentically as I can. And that authenticity, since I was the age of 4, has been one of multidimensionality. And as you say, appreciating that for all of us, really, our intuition is our superpower. We all have our intuition. We all have intuition because it's part of who we really are. But as you say, we're taught in the West, and this is something I'm hoping to really serve to change, is we are taught this paradigm of the nature of reality as being solely materialistic and a world of separation. And that actually is not even 20th century science. It's 19th century science, because by the middle of the 19th century and the latter part of the 19th century, that science of a mechanistic universe was prevailed. And so all of those industrial revolution and changes that went on through the 19th century were based on that science. The problem was in the early 20th century, when quantum physicists were realizing that mechanistic view of the world was at best limited, but has some foundational flaws, they were discovering this sense of non-local inseparability, this unity. And they didn't know what to do with it because it was so different from what they'd been taught. And yet that was the evidence. That was, the experimental discoveries. And so some of them went to India, actually, and they went to India and they asked the great sages then, what is this? And I suspect that they got laughed at, actually, because I suspect the Indian sages, and I know some of them actually did, say, but this is the nature of reality. You're discovering it now at a far deeper level than before. And there is a word in India tradition called Maya, Maya, that I know you will know. And sometimes it's translated as illusion and the view that this world is illusory. I don't have that view because an alternate translation is partial. Not that this world is not real, but it's only partial. And this is what the science of unity and this emergent cosmology, that with all of this new evidence, is validating the quantum physicists and Albert Einstein, who also saw consciousness as primary, and the ancient understanding. This emergent cosmology is of a living and loving universe, a universe that meaningfully exists and purposefully evolves from simplicity to complexity. And it does so, and this is another Indian sense. The Indian tradition talks about our universe being a great breath of Brahma, the great breath of God. And you and I, I'm sure, were both taught in Western schools that our universe began a long time ago, nearly 14 billion years ago, as a big bang. We know it wasn't big, but it was minute. But the point was, it wasn't a bang. It was exquisitely, beautifully fine-tuned and ordered and intentional. And so the first moment of an ongoing and universal big breath. So again, we loop round to that ancient wisdom. So the big breath of our universe breathes through us in every moment. And that's why I feel the science of unity is so powerful, because it brings that vastness into an intimate relationship. It brings the universe home to us, within us, flowing through us.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I'm just taking a moment to breathe, with the universe, to feel the universe breathing me, and to recognize that we're instruments in this whole divine play, in this Leela. Yeah, it's bigger and beyond us. And I loved that you said your intuition is your superpower. I literally just made a video that was on that theme, and the people that were making the video with me, they asked me to explain, like, why did we lose our intuition, and how do we know our intuition is real? And I just actually said, I'm a bit tired of this conversation because I have spent so much of my time kind of like being in that place where you're having to prove everything rather than just live it. And then in the end, what I said was, I think we're beyond needing to explain like that our intuition is real, and this is actually our time to reclaim it and to honor it and to learn how to work with it and to allow ourselves to live in a way that is more whole, where we're actually using our intelligence. But I definitely haven't been living with that level of courage since I was 4. I feel like my life has been like having these experiences that are so multidimensional, and experiences of this great unity, and then like falling back in the matrix, and then trying to bridge the two, and then like trying to explain, and you know, it's been like a real kind of a real churn. And I am really enjoying just this, like what I'm receiving from you is like just let that go now.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But you know, I so appreciate though, Amisha, because it is challenging. I mean, I think I was a born maverick. I was a born, you know, not the good girl on the team sort of thing. So I always went my own way. And I did that because my mum was so incredibly empowering. She was incredibly empowering. And so for me, from that very early age, and I didn't even share what I was experiencing with her, but she could see that I had this incredible curiosity. Why, all the way. And she encouraged that. And she encouraged me to be myself. And that's such a gift that any parent, I think, can give a child, just to be yourself, whatever that is. And as you say, I mean, I think the lovely thing now, the great and hopefully empowering thing now is that, first of all, for folks like yourself, you've gone on this journey of inner and outer discovery for so long. You trust that inner discovery. You trust your intuition. And you know, because it's validated for you so much. You know, the universe has this wonderful gift. When we trust it, it trusts us. There's that beautiful relationship of trust, and we journey at the speed of trust together and as, you know, as individuals. But what I think is helpful now is, because there are a lot of folks, as you say, well, show me the evidence. Why should I believe this? This desk looks incredibly solid, and this and that and the other. And the desk I'm sitting at appears solid. But as a cosmologist, as a scientist, I know that if I drill down smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, what I will find at the scale of the atom, and even deeper than that, is 99.99999999999% no thingness. And what remains is relationship of information, meaningful information that expresses itself as energy and matter and space and time. So those appearances of our universe are real, but they're not its deeper reality. And so what's coming forward now, this science of unity, this emergent understanding, actually, whereas the old model had no place for intuition, had no place for love, had no place for synchronicities, had no place at all for multidimensionality, and didn't really know what to do with consciousness. This new understanding brings all of that into a beautiful, simple wholeness and a universe, a living, loving, evolving universe where we are, as you say, we're the microcosmic co-creators of it, and we belong. For me, there's been a deep sense for so many people that where do we belong? Because we've been told a story where there is no real belonging. And now we're being offered, invited into both a new and ancient story, a narrative, a unitive narrative, where we belong. We don't even have to be invited in. We belong.
Thank you. I had tears in my eyes when you were talking about your childhood and just the gift of having somebody that fully allowed and honored that part of you. And I meet so many people that wasn't the case for, and that isn't the case for. And even as adults and in marriages where they have to hide parts of themselves and all of it. And it just really connects me to like a deep prayer that we can rapidly move beyond that. And that there's such a gift in allowing each other to be full and multidimensional. And, you know, that doesn't have to be with a child, that we can just do that with each other.
Exactly. And, you know, one thing that the universe, Einstein once said, the universe is as simple as it can be, but no simpler. And I've added a few words to that. As simple as it can be, but no simpler, to fulfill its evolutionary purpose. It seems to me that the evolutionary purpose of our universe is flowing through us, flowing through our planetary home, flowing through its whole existence and evolutionary potential. But its unity is expressed in radical diversity. When you consider, that every leaf on every tree is different, when every snowflake is different, once we get beyond atoms and into molecules and more complexity, that individuation, that diversity becomes extraordinarily abundant. So for each of us, we're each unique. Nearly 8 billion of us is each unique. And yet we're all part of this collective adventure. So it seems to me that, like in music, if we can sing our note, our unique note, and we can only do that if we're true to ourselves. Yeah. Each note is different. And yet we're all part of this incredible cosmic jazz, because it's not a written composition. It's like improvisational jazz. The universe is singing as it breathes. We're singing, or we can sing our own note, and together as part of that incredible universal adventure, if we choose.
And so on the if we choose, we are also living in a paradigm of divide and conquer and power over and extraordinary violence and a rise in refugees. And as we talk about that innate belonging, we're at this time where lands are being desecrated and climate disasters and people with nowhere to go. And yeah, it's pretty horrific what we're experiencing. And what is the relationship between that and what we're talking about here?
The relationship's absolutely profound and fundamental, because I speak of us having a dis-ease of separation. And with that dis-ease of separation, the symptoms of that are the behaviours that we enter into, the conflicts, the inequalities, the desecration. Wendell Berry once said, there are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places. So if we can, with this evidence, it's really so powerful evidence, as I mentioned, across all scales of existence, many fields of research, that's now becoming settled science. It's becoming settled science. It's not woo-woo. It's not out there. It's not alternative science. The evidence is piling up to such a degree that in 1922, it should have been in 1922, but it was 2022. It took 100 years. But in 2022, the quantum realization that our whole universe had to be unified for quantum physics to work at all was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics to 3 researchers who spent decades proving this, showing this. So the Nobel Prize for Physics is only given for settled science. Things are moving very, very rapidly in the realms of science now to a realization of unity. And what that means is that we can apply that evidence base to our discussions, to our explorations, to our arts and culture. We can bring it into our education. We can bring new ways of thinking, new ways of behaving, new ways of being, because rather than try and treat the symptoms of our collective dis-ease of separation, this takes us to the root of the dis-ease itself and aims to heal it from that place, which, as any doctor will say, is the only way to heal. Otherwise, if you're just trying to deal with the symptoms, you might pat some of those down, but others will come forward. This goes to the very cause of the way we have behaved with each other and our planetary home. I think it's moving in such a rapid, accelerating direction now. And I don't know about you, but I look at, I work as a planetary healer, and I see exactly and across what's going on. But it seems to me that we're coming to a point where at many, many different levels, we are realizing that enough is enough. There's a lot of waking up going on. There's a lot of remembering of wholeness going on. There's a lot of willingness for this breath to flow through us. And we're also realizing from the other side of that we cannot go on as we are. And I think that's where the rubber hits the road, as the saying goes. We cannot go on as we are. And the invitation is coming from the universe to show us, to invite us, to call us to a different way of seeing and being and behaving. That is our collective choice at the moment. This is our choice.
Thank you. It's very eloquent. And how extraordinary that this is happening in the scientific field.
It's interesting, that it is, because the science, if on some counts, is 400 years old, literally 400 years old in 2023. And it began in a book in writings of a man called Francis Bacon. And he wrote a treatise called In Satorium Scientiarum. I can never get this right. My Latin is very poor. I used to have to do an exam in Latin when I was 16 years old, but my Latin since has gone downhill at the rate of knots. But he wrote a book in Latin that was basically about the scientific method. And what he wanted to do was to move beyond the views of his time and the superstitions of his time into a way of exploring the world that could reveal evidence and could be experimentally verified, and so add to humanity's knowledge and depth about the understanding of the nature of reality. And that was the journey that started 400 years. And in the 19th century, as I mentioned, it ended in a very mechanistic view of the universe, because what it did in trying to move beyond superstition, it also moved beyond religious and spiritual understanding of the world. And there's a very good reason for that at the time. What's quite extraordinary to me now is that this emerging science, this essentially revelatory science, is doing what those pioneers 400 years ago really, if you read their writings and their depths, wanted to show. And that was the divine. They wanted to reveal the divine through science. And we're at that point because the old mechanistic science is falling away. And the post-materialist science, the science of unity, the science of love, the science of consciousness, is revealing, as you say, the multidimensional and unitive wholeness of the whole world and our place in it, the meaning and purpose of our place in it. That's what they really, they weren't even called scientists then. They were called natural philosophers. They became scientists because of the knowingness of what they were unfolding. But now perhaps we can return to that original name of natural philosophers, because philosophy is the love of knowledge, more importantly, the love of wisdom. And that's what's leading this revolution, not just in science, but I hope a revolution in our collective human consciousness.
Beautiful. I'm just so moved by everything that you're sharing. It's it's very powerful to receive. I would love for you to share more with us around Worldwide View and the work that you've been doing, connecting with Indigenous wisdom holders all over the world, and that relationship between ancient wisdom and science as we understand it.
I'd love to. Well, in 2017, Amisha, my book, The Cosmic Hologram, was published. And along with its publishing, there were a group of folks who felt that hopefully it would be the seed, a seed point of this emerging movement of wholeness, of unity and diversity. And so on the basis of that, I co-founded WholeWorld-View to really share and serve the understanding, the experiencing, embodying of unitive awareness. And what could that mean in the world? Going back to what we were talking about, when we see the world through a different lens of wholeness, of unity rather than separation, we behave differently. So what could that mean in terms of transforming our education, our health systems, our governance systems, our organizations, our economics? Because everything is affected when we change our view, when we change our worldview, we change our behaviors. So that was the purpose of helping to do this through WholeWorld-View. And then in 2022, when my next book was published, The Story of Gaia, which is subtitled The Big Breath and the Evolutionary Journey of Our Conscious Planet, it took what was shared and all the evidence and the understanding and the framing of what was shared in the Cosmic Hologram to that next level. And there's a third book that is yet to write me, but I hope will be called Many Voices, One Heart, which is about us. What does it mean for us when we choose to wake up and embrace, this understanding and moving forward? So my work with many, many different communities around the world really are to serve this. And of course, Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous communities they've been the wisdom keepers through the ages for this, where, the ancient Indian tradition to some degree was left behind to some degree. The ancient Chinese tradition, all of which speak to this, was moved on from the ancient Greek geometers who said that, the world is geometric. They were said, thank you, yes, that's a long time ago. Thank you for your insights, and we're moving on. We're now rediscovering that the world is geometric, not the idealized geometries of the ancient Greeks, but fractal geometries in clouds and river systems and planetary systems and solar systems and galaxies. The fractal patterns of our universe scale up from the tiniest to the whole. And it's those patterns and relationships and resonances and harmonics and music that we're finding is all pervasive through the reality of our universe. So that ancient wisdom is being reappreciated and honored and taken forward, of course. We're not going back to it. It's coming forward to meet us. And the science is meeting. And the indigenous wisdom of, the traditions of reciprocity, kindness, community, mutuality, loving truth, are all coming together because they are the deepest nature of who we are, who we really are, and the nature of our universe and the nature and multidimensional wonder of the cosmos.
Thank you, Jude. I could just listen to you all day, so it's hard to ask more questions because everything you share is it's taking me, just moving through my body, expanding everything.
Oh, bless you. That's not what my husband says, by the way.
Yes. Well, we all have to have people in our lives to keep us grounded.
We certainly do. We most certainly do. And he's the most wonderful, wonderful, wonderful man. I adore him. He's wonderful.
Thank you for tuning in. If you are enjoying this episode, do join our membership. For a small contribution, you can be part of our community, where we deepen the conversation and offer spaces of learning and embodiment. As a member, you are a patron supporting the making of this show, keeping the episodes full length, free and accessible for all. And you receive a number of benefits, such as monthly soul space, going deeper sessions, access to our library of workshops, and discounts on all our online and in-person experiences. Our membership is what makes us able to make this show and stay advertising free in a world that is always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. head to allthatweare.org/membership to find out more and join today. I wonder if there's any particular stories that you can share with us of some of the people that you've met or the places that you've been, and how you've really experienced what we're talking about here. I just find that makes it so much more tangible.
Oh, there are so many, Amisha. I have written earlier books on the 13th step, for example, and others that tell some of these stories. But I guess what really has moved me with human encounters is where I've encountered love incarnate. And often that's been incredibly simple people who don't have a lot of money but are wealthy beyond measure, people whose lives and whose family communities just give them such joy every day. I remember we took a group of folks to Australia on one of the sacred journeys we undertook many years ago now, and we had the great joy of spending 3 days on the ancestral homes and land of an Aboriginal community. And for them, it's not about land ownership at all. It doesn't even, have that context, but it's in right relationship with our planetary home, our Mother Earth. And for them, they live every day in this glorious flow of what we sometimes hear the word dream time, but they don't use that term. They call their experience of life the Chirkapa, and they see it as a lived, loved, every breath, every moment, interwoven dance with all life. So everywhere is sentient. The mountains, the trees, the land itself, the river, everything is absolutely interwoven as a web of life. And to live with them, with that experience, and be so kindly welcomed in as extended family was just extraordinary. And I know our lives in the West are very, very different, but if we can remember some of that simplicity, some of that community, and I know we do, we absolutely do. But the thing I find very different when I live alongside Indigenous communities is they slow down. They're not hectic. They're not rushing around, and they're not distracted. If they're doing something, and that can be play, or it can be creating a meal, or it can, whatever they do, they're present. And I think that sense of presence and that sense of pace is so powerful. That there's something I heard recently about when things get urgent, slow down.
Yeah, it's Bayo Akomolafe.
And it's such a wonderful wisdom to offer, because, when things get urgent, we tend to hyperventilate and go into even more runaround, and that serves no one and nothing. So that was the teaching that I gained from being with Indigenous communities around the world.
And the urgency that we kind of feel a tool of white supremacy kind of systemic ways, so that we're always kind of constantly in a bit of a faff. And then it also means that things can kind of happen without proper planning and getting everyone on board. And, it kind of creates this sense of just a kind of constant crisis. And actually, whatever is happening on this planet, we're here to be with that. This is the time that we're here, and this is the time that we have, and whatever is happening is part of our reality. And so that's what we have to be with. And somehow it gets kind of whipped up into a frenzy.
There's so much wisdom in what you're saying. I mean, just to respond a little bit to that wisdom, I agree wholeheartedly with you. I had an old boss when I was still in corporate life, and he used to talk about being a busy fools. And it's that running around, rather than just slow down, take a deep breath, and then see from that wider perspective. And one of the things that I think, going back to what I was saying about our ways of being, are really based, certainly in the West, on this 19th century paradigm of a mechanistic universe, a clockwork universe. And so very hierarchical, but also where imposition, which I think is very colonial, where imposition is the way of being. So you impose your will, you impose your control. It's very hierarchical, and I would say masculine, and I'm not gender male, female, but, the universal wisdom teachings talk about, and this is part of the Tao of the Chinese tradition, in the beginning is the one, not was, is. The one becomes two, the two becomes three, and from the three, 10,000 things are born. So when that one, that wholeness, that unity differentiates itself, not separates, differentiates itself, it does so in universal masculine, universal feminine. But throughout the universe, they are then in complementary relationships where the attributes of each and both together integrate to something greater than the sum of the parts. And that becomes, in essence, a divine child energy of co-creativity and joy and wonder and exploration and curiosity. So what I would say is that in response to how we are, our worldview of separation has separated us on all those levels. And therefore we act from that separation, which is a very lonely place to be. And we run around it trying to get, this control. Because if we feel we're in control of something, then we don't feel somehow that we are so separate, or we don't. But it's the wrong way of doing it. It's from the outside rather than from the inside. So remembering that wholeness, welcoming that complementarity of masculine and feminine into our ways of being, slowing down, breathing, coming together, and instead of imposing, appreciate that we can attune to and align with the evolutionary impulse and flow of our universe. When we do that, it's rather like being on on a river. We go with the flow of the river, and sometimes that's fast and sometimes that's slow, but we're not trying to either outpace the river or hold back against the river. We realize that the universe is this vast, wondrous river of consciousness and evolutionary impulse. When we do that, we can relax into our role, what is ours to serve, because then we can become servant leaders, and we're all leaders in this journey. And we can become, instead of a role model, we can become soul models.
Oh, I love that. Yes, to more soul models.
To more soul models. We can never have enough soul models.
When you were sharing about the communities that you visited and that sense of how ultimately this is what all of us humans really crave, is to be part of a community that is, well, that has space for actually the processing that we need to do collectively around whatever is happening. I feel like one of the tricky things about the way that we're kind of doing community in the West is that without that presence of the divine, or what we have now is like a kind of very capitalized relationship with the presence of the divine, where you have to pay to kind of go on retreats and things. And, I'm part of this, I host those things. And, and we're stuck in a thing because I have to pay my own bills. And, so we're kind of like stuck in this thing, but it kind of means that some of the innate parts of what we need in order to really step out of our separation and into that field of unity are so missing. And I love that there are cultures where there's professional whalers that come to to events to bring the emotional current that allows the energy to move through. Or there are communities that have collective grief rituals that you come to and process whatever is there for you or in the community. And being able to honor where our pain is and where our suffering is, that brings us closer into the space of unity. We are at a time where so much is dying, where so much is in that last fight, which can be really brutal. And also we're at a time where literally more and more people are dying, and there's Indigenous premonitions about this time where a third will die or a third will be sick or unwell, and so this is like a time where we really need to take such good care of each other and really like form a deep relationship with death and with that like surrender into form, and allowing the separateness to keep being transformed into more unity. And it feels like it's a breath by breath movement. It doesn't end, and we just have to get more skilled at it, and just without those spaces and those spaces, they don't always have to be sad and angry. Like so much can move through joy, so much of the suffering can move through joy. But it's tricky when so many of our interactions, they operate at this like very like surface level. I feel like we all crave, whether we know it or not, something more than that. And we're so overstimulated with distractions and things to numb us out of that craving.
I wholeheartedly agree. And it seems to me that, you know, our collective trauma has been heightened so much by this pervasive worldview of separation. It literally has been and is a dis-ease that the Indigenous communities, you know, many of them have suffered mightily from colonialization and colonialization driven again by this sense of imposition and superiority and separation. It's all comes down to the separation. But what I find in those communities is a profound compassion for the white fella in many ways, which I find extraordinary and moving. You know, I've visited more than 80 countries. I've worked with many teachers and traditions. And what I'm absolutely awestruck and in wonder is the depth of compassion from folks who've been on the receiving end of so much awfulness. And also, I would say that we're all trauma. You know, as a healer, I know that acts of separation damage the perpetrator as much as the receiver of that, you know, the receiver of those actions. Everybody suffers. We do it to others, they do it to us, we do it to ourselves, all coming from that dis-ease of separation. So this is a time, and it's an extraordinary time, because as you say, Amisha, we're in the process of potentially healing from that dis-ease of separation. We have the evidence to show that separation is illusory. And we have the potential to evolve, to evolve to who we can become on a next chapter of this adventure that we're all part of. And so what I tend to do is I tend to reframe the time of now from a crisis to a metamorphosis. Because while a crisis, and both have their similarity, they have their similarities. But I would describe a metamorphosis, for example, when a caterpillar, which has pretty much eaten all it can do as a caterpillar, gets to a point when it can eat no more, and it forms a chrysalis. It goes into a chrysalis. And in that chrysalis, it dissolves. Its caterpillar body essentially dissolves. And in that dissolving, what's called imaginal cells of a butterfly begin to form. And those imaginal cells then start to grow and join up and become organelles. And as they do so, the dissolving caterpillar fights them. The immune system, the dying immune system of the caterpillar still fights. But what that does is it strengthens the developing butterfly. It actually strengthens it. And so at the end of that period of metamorphosis, the butterfly emerges. And instead of a species that eats everything it can, it actually sips sugar from flowers and pollinates them and takes that sweetness from flower to flower, enabling, there are so many. I mean, evolution's a marvelous thing, but one of its great miracles is pollination, where the plants and the insects have co-evolved so that they can benefit each other and share that abundance. And maybe, and I hope, and this is what I serve, is the prayer that we are in that process of evolving into a butterfly species, a pollinator species, where we can heal our relationships with ourselves, each other, and our beloved planetary home, our beloved Mother Earth, Gaia.
Beautiful. I really hope and pray that that is the process that we are in, and that we choose to allow this evolution, that we choose to participate and surrender to the dissolution so that we can become pollinators, and we can let go of this greed and selfishness and the wetiko that is so prevalent in our dominant culture. How do you feel, Gaia, in all of this? And I ask that question because, some people feel that Gaia is fine and Gaia will do as Gaia will do, and it's whether us humans are going to be part of the future or not that's the question. And then others will say that Gaia is sad and bleeding and crying, and we need to respond. And I'm curious as to how you understand that dynamic.
My sense of this, and I feel Gaia very deeply. When I didn't write the Story of Gaia as a book, she wrote me. She, I feel, gave me the incredible privilege and joy of writing a story of her. I would liken her to a mother. I don't think there's no accident, and I think it's very appropriate that many traditions consider her as our mother, our primary mother, as indeed she is, Pachamama. And Gaia, of course, was the goddess of the earth to the ancient Greeks. So I would liken her to a mother that, and I would say this as part of the universe. It's not just the story of Gaia. The story of Gaia is a story of the universe. And the story of the universe is our story. We're all in this together in that sense. So after 14 billion years of our universe, and after over 4 billion years of our planetary home, Gaia, we're having this conversation. We and others of her biological children are the most complex beings that are part of her sentience at this point. So she and our entire universe have undertaken an amazing, incredible journey over 14 billion years, from the first atoms to the first stars, to generations of stars and galaxies and black holes, to interstellar clouds of stardust and ice that brought complexity to the edge of biological emergence. But go no further. To go further, planetary systems had to be born, as ours was. Not in chaos again, none in chaos, but as this incredibly ordered, resonant planetary system with our central sun and with Gaia in what's called the Goldilocks zone, the habitable zone, not too hot, not too cold, and a water planet. And what that enabled from that amazing, amazing womb of an interstellar cloud was the ability as a planetary home to then birth evolution and evolve biological children. From the very earliest cells to more and more complex beings over 4 billion years, our sun, our moon, and Gaia have been parents and family to this emergence through amazing times, not quietude at all, but pulse upon pulse, wave upon wave of evolution to this point. Until now, none of Gaia's children have behaved as we've behaved. Even when, bacteria long time ago got a bit above themselves and ate everything in practice, and then there was a crash. But from that crash came more complexity. We are really, in truth, the only planetary caterpillar. And we have eaten and destroyed in our ignorance and our arrogance so much. But she has nurtured us. She is our mother. We have purpose for her. We have meaning for her. And we can evolve to become co-evolutionary partners with her. So if we don't get over this metamorphosis, if we don't survive, if we do go extinct, what does that mean? I believe she would go on. She will go on because she will mother, and she is mother to other children and still has potential to nurture other children. But what would it be like to anyone who's joining us as a mother to lose a loved child? What is it in conflict to lose a child? What is in disease to lose a child? Mothers go on. They're adamant. But they grieve. I believe Gaia would grieve us. And she's giving us every possible opportunity for us not to go extinct. She's giving every opportunity to grow up, to wake up. And our heritage as homonyms is something like 6.5 million years. The great apes, the other beings from which we diverted and continue to evolve 6.5 million years ago, they didn't. Gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, they didn't go on. We had very special characteristics that enabled us to continue to evolve to this point. And we weren't alone. Over those millions of years, there were other homonyms like us. Denisovians, Neanderthalists, many others. They were our cousins. We are the last of our kind. What a shame it would be for us not to choose to awaken, to remember who we really are. What a shame it would be for us to disappoint our mother. That's something I hope we don't do. I think we have. And like most mothers, she's forgiven us time and time and time again. But she can forgive us no more because we're destroying not just ourselves, but so much of her Gaia sphere, her sentient Gaia sphere. So let's choose different. Let's choose life. Let's choose love.
Thank you for sharing. It's all just very moving today. Yeah, I'm just really feeling just the full spectrum of where we are in both the micro, in my own experience, and in the macro, and this relationship with mother and as mother and all of it. The question that I have is, how do we know if we are choosing this future? I say that because knowing the community that listens here, that will have joining us and sharing this time with us, that they are incredibly loving and yet probably quite hyper vigilant on wanting to get it right. And and really not wanting to be part of the problem, and yet also aware of how connected we all are, and how much all the systems of oppression are running through us and our lives. And of course, anyone that's listening to a podcast has a a degree of privilege and the ability to be pondering such questions of life, rather than just in the very immediacy of tending to what's in front of them. And so I wonder what your kind of practical offering is for how to live this. And I feel like it can be really difficult because of the way that the power structures are, and because of what's happening with so many of our means of showing up, the way that the walls are coming in on protesting, or what it's like to feel continually ignored when you write to your MP, or you express something, or you try and create something, and funding keeps being taken away when you're trying to do things in your community. You know, we're in this time where like it's not easy to live what we know, and especially with cost of living pressures. And yeah, it's just like it's a real pressure cooker. And yeah, in that kind of space of, yes, it's trusting our intuition, and it's living love in the day to day, right? It's not about going to this ceremony or going to that. It's about actually, like, are we able to make eye contact with the people in front of us? Are we able to bring more of that presence? Are we able to feel in integrity with all of our choices? All of that. And yeah, I wonder how practical you can take us today.
Well, whenever I hear somebody saying, I absolutely appreciate it, Amisha, I do wholeheartedly understand. I never say it's easy. I really don't. I mean, my own life journey, my dad died when I was 10 years old. My mum brought us up. He was a coal miner. He died in his early 30s. I grew up in the north of England, in very challenging circumstances. And I've had a life that, you know, has really been around the houses many, many times, and ups and downs, and like we all have. And I also appreciate, having been in war zones, having been in many places of deep, deep deprivation, that I am incredibly privileged. Incredibly privileged. So from that perspective, what I would say is, you are you, I am me. We have all the privilege and all the pain and all the author of our lives. So how can we be the best we can be in service with all of that baggage, with all of that journeying, with all of those challenges, and with all of those joys? So I go back to really inviting authenticity in someone, because life is so much heavier if you're not who you really are. And sometimes we're not sure who we really are, because we put so many masks on and so many clothes on that we're not sure who we are. So one of the practical ways is a journey to try to find out who we are and come from that place. And we know that's where our intuition is so powerful, because our intuition is who we really are. When we listen to it, when we hear it, when we trust it, that is listening to our true self. And when we do that, a lot of the other heaviness around the shoulds and shouldn'ts, and what would they think of us and what wouldn't they think of us, and what do I, they just fall away, and we become lighter. And when we become lighter, we become stronger. We're able to help not just ourselves, but we're able to serve others. And when we do that, one of the great things about intuition is it forever reminds us and re-hearts us that we're not separate. And so the more that we live into that way of being, the lighter we become, the greater the service we can offer without being burdened by it. Because often when we want to do, as you said, hypervigilant to do the right thing, we're desperate not to do the wrong thing. As my mum would say, get over yourself.
Yeah.
Get over yourself. And it's such wise words from her, because we all say the wrong thing sometimes. We all do the wrong thing sometimes. But give ourselves a break and give others a break. For me, it's about being discerning, but not being judgmental, but being discerning, saying that doesn't feel right. That doesn't sit comfortably with me. and then do something about it. And if you do see something you want to do something about, don't say to your husband, your wife, or your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it may be, somebody should do something about that. Because if it occurs to you that something should be done, then you're the person who should be doing it in whatever way.
Yeah. Or at least asking someone else to do it really clearly and directly.
Whatever it
Rather
takes,
than
whatever it
expecting.
takes, whatever it takes. But the other thing as well is to realize that life and the universe is non-linear. In other words, what you were saying about smiling at someone, a tiny act of kindness can have huge ripples that we're not aware of. So just being kind. And the other thing I would definitely say is keep a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Laugh at yourself. Don't take yourself seriously. Take things seriously. Do the best you can in the world, but do not take yourself seriously.
Yeah, I love what you share about judgment and discernment and how different they are. And that, like, with discernment, you might understand that like a dynamic or a relationship isn't right for you, but you don't have to like make them wrong.
Exactly.
It's like it can just be, and it's not the right time for that, or you're not in the right place. And I've been reflecting on some of the conflicts that I've been a part of in recent years, especially as I feel like we're in more of this churn. And it's when people want to see like a whole negative story in someone and forget that everyone is doing the best that they can. If they didn't do something exactly right, it probably was just an overwhelm on their behalf or whatever, or just a different way of seeing. And I feel like often, especially like in spiritual communities, like in the kind of modern day spiritual, it can be very like, well, this person is this and they're this and that, that and it's my authenticity to express this. and I feel like there's a real call to be gentle and to see the best in each other, and also to recognize that we hurt each other, and some people don't have like access to the best of their intentions, and so you might want to create some boundaries and some space, but it doesn't have to be about making people wrong and kind of sharing your truth in a violent way.
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, when somebody jumps up and down and says, this is my truth, I say, well, actually, truth. It's your opinion, it's your views, yes. But I tend, it's perhaps the scientist in me, I tend to see truth that the sun rises each morning. That to me is truth. I hope we could all agree on that. I feel the truth of love. So I'm not a fan of my truth and your truth. I'm a bigger fan of this is my view and perspective and felt experience, yes, or that is yours. But I think we've sort of, in a way, to some degree, dishonored the word truth by sharing, by terming it in that way. And I love what you're saying though about discerning, because when we discern something, we say, well, this doesn't feel right for me, but you're not making the other person wrong. And yes, for truth, loving truth, to share a view that says, this is how I'm feeling, but do so with compassion and kindness. And another thing my mum always used to say is give that person the benefit of the doubt, because we're so quick to jump in, aren't we, at the moment, and make comments and realize that, none of us have a 360-degree panoramic view of anything. In a way, we're all, in a room with an elephant and touching different parts of it and trying to make sense of the whole of it. So let's do that together. Let's do that together.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love, Jude, for you to share us more around how you made space to be able to, hear the words of Gaia and all of this beautiful work that you do, and what it is that you do in your own life, or how you've been moved in order to be open in this way.
That's a wonderful question. I'm not sure I have the equivalent wonder of an answer, but you know, everybody said the J word.
Yeah, my questions are, they're just
That's a great question. It's a journey.
I never expect answers. Really.
I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful. It's a dance. It's a journey, and for us all, it's a different one, isn't it? I mean, for me, it took a long time. I was in that sort of perspective. I always, because I was always walking between worlds, I always had that understanding of wholeness and multidimensionality. But it didn't mean that I necessarily lived my life in accordance with that understanding. For a lot of my life, I ran and I ran and I ran. I became very successful in business. I was incredibly distracted. But gradually, I began to appreciate just how ineffective I was. And the things that mattered to me, how ineffective I was able to serve them with those levels of distraction. And gradually, I mean, I don't meditate. That's not for me. I've come to a point, I hope, where my life is a living meditation. And that certainly is the guidance and the wisdom of so many teachers I've had through my life, that you come to a point where you live in the here and now, you live presently, you live truthfully, you live joyfully, you live lovingly, you live gratefully. So those ways of being have been sort of, shaken through me through so many of my experiences and my whole life. So every morning now, when I do wake up, and I usually wake up at the time of sunrise, because it's such a beautiful time. But of course, in the winter, it means I sleep in, and in the summer, I wake early. But I love it because I feel more in pace with the days. But it is to waken with love and joy and gratitude in my heart. And it is to go to bed at night with love and joy and gratitude in my heart. And even if we only do that for a couple of minutes, even if we just say it to ourselves, even when we're not quite feeling it, there's something about those words and that intention that just gently softens through, ripples through, dissolves through our body and our sense of who we are and what we're here to do.
I also love to never shut any curtains unless I'm in the city where there's too many lights, but so that I can be with whatever it is. And the room that I'm sleeping in at the moment has lots of huge windows and no curtains. And so last night was very windy and stormy, and I was in it through my dream world. It was really, really beautiful to live in that proximity with what's happening. And I love what you share around just a way of being. And I feel like when I first learned to meditate, I really needed that as a practice and as a tool in order to find that stillness and that softness and that presence, and be able to listen to my intuition or to listen to what was kind of moving through me, because everything was so busy. And also it was just a different time. The world has changed and evolved, and our access to consciousness has, as that's happened, and that there is a rewiring of that. I found that my practice of at times in my life has been so disciplined and long. It fell away in exchange for something that was much more naturally arising and that would allow that divine impulse within me. Sometimes it's I wake up and I really need that movement, or I need that stillness, but it doesn't come from a place of I must do this, that kind of one must sit and take their spiritual practice seriously. It's I understand that my life is a spiritual practice, and I honor that with such reverence and sacredness. And I invite in the play and the anger and the sadness and the grief and the joy,
All of these.
and appreciate that with presence. And I can feel when I slip out of that, And then it's about knowing, okay, what are the tools, or what is it that's going to call me back in, like into that place? And I feel like if we can then learn to live in that state of presence, and just not make it always this kind of, oh, I should be doing that. You know, how many times do people should themselves about all of this
Let
stuff?
go should.
Yeah. Yeah. The worst is when you should other people as well.
Oh, no, that is no. Exactly. Sometimes I think we should other people when it's like a double should, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like double shoulding. No, don't do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. I'm always like, should according to who? Like, what voice is there saying, like, this is the only way, like, in that moment?
Exactly. And it really does lighten us, doesn't it? When we get rid of that should intention, it's so much lighter. So much lighter. I don't know whether you do this, but what I've found that the simplest way, if I am in whatever space doesn't feel centered, is literally to take some deep breaths. It is so remarkably powerful and so incredibly easy. And it's again, going back to the ancient wisdom of India, the word for breath, of course, is the same word for spirit, prana. So when I talk about the big breath of the universe breathing through us, just in times of stress, just to soften or close my eyes and just take 3 breaths is so helpful, so nourishing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do feel like I tap into a wellspring of the practices that I have been devoted to, and I tap into a well stream of the beautiful community moments that I've experienced of practice. And even when you share this, I remember being in a 300-hour yoga teacher training in tantric philosophy when we were just all sat together breathing prana, and really feeling like spirit like dance and with us through the breath. And so then when you say it, I'm able to just really remember that in its full strength, of these moments of where that's been. But I'm curious what you said about how this has been like shared with you from different indigenous wisdom keepers around presence, like over kind of needing to be in the practice. And I would love to hear a little bit more around that.
Yeah, I think it goes back as well to what you said earlier, Amisha, about ritual and rites of passage. Because indigenous communities, as did ancient communities, to me, honor, this whole journey of life, and also the innate sacredness in everything. So I think that has a huge part to play in a community's well-being and whole being in that sense. And that's, again, what I loved so much in my experiences with indigenous communities from South America to Alaska to China to India to Australasia to Africa. There's that each have their own cultures, but there is that commonality that the journey of life is honored in community as well as personally, and that everything is sacred. And very few, I mean, I know there are traditions, of course, of yoga and many others, but generally, again, it's a living meditation. When people, I've been with women washing clothes by the banks of a river and having a wonderful time and this incredible rhythmic washing. And that's a meditation in that sense. Or when people come together and sit round a fire, a hearth, and tell stories, it's so nourishing. And it's not in silence, but it's in joy and it's in laughter and it's playfulness. But it is a meditation in that sense. And maybe perhaps instead of calling it a meditation, I tend to use the word attunement, because for me, those times are attuning to the flow of the universe. We are attuning to who we really are and with who we really are and aligning with who we really are. So yes, attuning is a word I love because I love music and I love our music of the music of the spheres, the music of our universe. So when we attune ourselves, we attune to the authentic note of who we are and the divine being who we are.
Yeah, I love that notion of attunement. It's more present than practice, which makes us feel like
Exactly.
there's something real and unreal again, rather than partial and whole.
I agree. And I think the other thing about attunement is it's fun. Speaking to musicians, I absolutely revere musicians. I was only allowed to play the triangle in my school orchestra, so I revere musicians. But their presence is so powerful that in that moment of that note of that music, it's such a wonderful thing to be in the company of, in the community of. That is what really brings people into that sense of presence. And you can feel it throughout your body. And it's just such a wonderful way of communing and communion.
Absolutely. And that's something that we've lost as community, just that normalcy of gathering together in song, and the song just being the living prayer and being that attunement together. And I love that more and more spaces of song are popping up, and ones that allow like a little bit more expression than, than some of the more traditional kind of hymn singing styles. Personally, I always loved hymn singing in church when I was younger and used to go. But I was watching something on TV where they were singing hymns, and everyone just looked so vacant. and 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 there wasn't the aliveness of the attunement. It was like just going through the motions, and that really is everything that we're talking about here. Like, in every moment of life, how can it be an attunement rather than going through the motions?
Exactly. Yes, it's a rite of life. Literally, RITE and RIGHT, a rite of life. Yes, which is so beautiful, rather than the rote, and just turning the wheel. It's to truly be alive in every moment with all that comes with that,
Yeah, absolutely. And in my experience, when we're really prepared to be with the darkness and to be with the grief, when it's really there, when it really comes through us, if we're able to be there, what I've found, and again, you kind of can't like expect this to happen, but somehow it always does. When I'm fully in that grief, it doesn't even seem possible. But what I've experienced is when I'm really prepared to go into that full feeling of grief, or of feeling trapped, or of feeling stuck, whatever it is, that somehow, somewhere, something else just happens almost spontaneously, where I feel like the complete other end of that spectrum. And I do believe that if we're willing to expand the spectrum that we live here with, that so much is possible for humanity, that is the invitation to go from a sort of narrow spectrum of numbness and sort of perceived safety and going through the motions into really living.
I love that. I mean, that's, for me, that's the essence of grace. That's the essence of grace. When we are willing to be, truly be in that moment, and to honor that flow through us and live that full spectrum, as you so beautifully put it, of what life is about, and not feel we've just come to visit.
Yeah.
Although we have in a way, but it's much more than that. So we've come to belong. We've come to belong, and to, in belonging, to be the wholeness of who we are.
Beautiful, Jude. Would you like to leave us with a call to action? I feel like we've we've been through many.
I'd choose love. My call to action is choose love in every choice we make.
And do you also have an outer expression of that, perhaps something that we can support or find out more about, something that's happening in the world or in your community that is particularly meaningful for you at this time?
It still comes back to that, because whether it's, the community of WholeWorld-View, whether it's your community with all that we are, whether it's communities around the world, this is our collective choice at the moment, it seems, to choose love. I can't be simpler than that. I can't be more challenging than that. I can't be more inviting than that. I can't be more empowering than that. Choose love.
Choose love. And your website for everyone to connect with you more. We'll share everything in the show notes, but it's nice for people to hear it as they're listening too.
Of course. It's www.wholeworld-view.org. So that's whole, WHOLE, world, WORLD, hyphen, view, VIEW.org. Whole World View. And everyone is so welcome to come home to our website. And we do have a free newsletter if people would like to join that as well. And all things unitive.
And you will be met with some beautiful videos and all of Jude's books and so much more as you delve into that whole world view. Jude, it's been such a joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Amisha. Thank and bless you for all that you do, and my love and blessings to all the community of all that we are. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I hope that we get to connect again in other ways in the future. What I want to share for our friends listening that might not get this, hopefully you will, but your presence is a real example of how being in your presence can just shift the energy fields around you. I arrived feeling like very different to how I was within like 10 seconds of being with you. And I feel like that in itself, like that's everything that we're talking about here.
Thank you, Amisha. And bless you, my dear.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on allthatweare.org. We give space to our guests to share their perspective without debating it or fact-checking, as this approach allows for deep, unedited conversations from the heart. We trust your discernment and wisdom to take what is useful and challenge what isn't in your own understanding. We offer spaces for discussion and integration in our membership community, which we would love for you to join. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible by you, our beautiful community. If you loved this and would like to connect more deeply with us, please join our membership. You choose what you contribute based on our sliding scale, and you become a patron whose support makes this podcast happen, as well as receiving access to a library of many resources and invitations to nourishing events. Please also hit subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen so others can find us. This podcast is made by an all-female global team. Me, Amisha Gadiali, producer and host, Anna Greta Folderbach, who crafts the words that accompany each episode, and Mary Chan, who edits the sound so skillfully. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. It invites the full power of the more than human world, nature, the unseen, our ancestors, and our future generations. It reminds us that we never exist in silo, through borders, timelines, or polarity, that in each and every moment, all that we are is here.